Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Checkpoint Coffee. And in this episode, we have a very special guest with us today, Shafiu from Arcils. Hi, Shafiu.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And
Yeah.
thank you for being with us as well. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about Arcils and some of your really cool projects. So, for those who don't know, Arcils is one of the most prominent local game developers in the Maldives. And so, before I say any more, how about I let the man speak for himself? So, Shafi, for someone who doesn't know what Arcils is, how would you describe who you guys are?
I think Arcils is out with a vision to create the game development industry in Maldives. That's the easiest way I can explain Arcils to someone.
That is quite well put. I like that. All right, so I'm going to ask you a little bit about Arcils and how you guys got started. What do you do? So, let's begin with the very beginning. How did you and your team come together with the idea of doing game development?
When we started Arcils, we actually had three founders. We used to hang out and do a lot of gaming sessions together.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, we were me and my son, and there was Sohan.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just came out of the blue that we wanted to start making games, and it went unofficially for a few days. We tried things here and there with game engines and, trying
Right.
out stuff that we actually didn't understand. And it ended out actually forming a small team and, setting out targets and a vision because
Oh,
this industry was not in Maldives at that time. So we thought the need of this is something that's actually really sustainable in future
hmm.
and something that could be actually done with very small real estate, like a small office space. And then we actually thought
Right.
about it economically as well. So that's how we started out with a small team. We
Uh,
started out with Unity actually. We had Islander. I think Islanders, the game that we are working on right now, planned out even when we started out. So it was just ideas. We started in Unity. We didn't know literally anything. So just tutorials going through one by one, and none of us were educated in a game development sense or anything like that. But I guess things turned out, and we worked on multiple versions for Islanders. I think that process was a really long, I don't know how to explain it. Like, we were redoing the whole project over and over again because
just trying
we
to
felt
find
like
that
this.
perfect iteration, right?
Yes, the perfect iteration. So I think we did the whole project twice in Unity, like
Wow.
for a small scope, and we then decided to shift into Unreal just after 1 year of using Unity.
In a lot of ways, you guys are local trailblazers for the game development, I think. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges that you've faced so far, being essentially one of the first names in in the pack. So can you talk a little bit about the challenges that ourselves faced as a development studio or are facing as well?
I think talent is the most challenging problem for us. If we want to look out for talent, like there are not people s- there are no education certifications in Maldives, so like people who are actually trained to do game development. And since
Hmm.
we shifted to Unreal Engine, C++ is basically a forgotten language in Maldives because we don't use it in many applications or softwares in
Hmm.
Maldives. So we had to bring people into office and just pay for them to learn for like 3 months,
My
sometimes 4 months.
goodness.
Some people take 6 months. So it's like we can't put them to commercial use until the duration is passed. So I think that's
Right.
the biggest, and that would be the biggest, since I want to have a local team. Is like,
Much as
yeah,
possible,
local
right?
team. Yeah.
And okay, I can understand that. So, with those challenges in mind, what would you say so far are the greatest triumphs that Arcil has managed to achieve in its career?
We have we are currently running a 7-man full team actually at the moment, who
Mm-hmm.
were all trained by us, the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's my biggest achievement so far. A really good team that operates on itself right now. Also, the recognition of Islanders for some of the biggest publishers out in the world right now, and also the launching and partnership with Tirag for Takuros as well. That was quite an achievement for us as well.
Takuru Wars. Now that you mentioned that, I would like to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about Takuru Wars. For those who are listening and might not be aware, Takuru Wars is a MOBA game that was released by Arcils and it is currently available on which platforms again?
It's on mobile.
It is basically a game where you have that MOBA setup with a lot of Maldivian influence in it, as you can see from the name. So let's talk a little bit about Thakuru Wars, all right? So in the case of Thakuru Wars, it came out initially a little bit earlier on, but then you guys took it back to kind of rework it a little bit and re-release it, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about like what went on there? Want me to
We making Thakuras for 1 whole years with a small team. Actually, essentially, we were not that experienced at that time. I think this was our second year into game development, and we had investors at that point for Thakuras. I mean, Dirab was on board, and there was two private parties who invested in Thakuras, so I couldn't let them down. So we had to come out with some products. So I think 0.5 was a bit rushed, and that's the reason why it looked like an unfinished product and a lot of things were missing. We got some good feedback and support from the community and some really good experience from that as well. So we took things really slow, released a couple of updates for the first release, and then after some time we saw users going off because there was really nothing to come back and play. There
Right,
was no reason for you to come back. There was not enough incentive for that. So
right.
we decided that it's time to like scratch this, rework the entire Thakuras. And at that point we just took down the game. I think we weren't focusing on like building or making the product the existing product better. We just started from scratch, back to the drawing board, whole team set, discussing game mechanics, reworking the game was actually built from scratch up again for
That
1.0.
that is amazing. That is an amazing amount of work as well. For what it's worth, MN Gaming has checked out Takuru Wars, and our review is reasonably positive. You know, we feel like the game is a lot more stable than it used to be, and that it has a really good foundation, and are looking forward to seeing what happens in the future. But speaking of the foundation, one of the things that we really liked about the game were the different character archetypes, right? So you have Takuru and a lot of different other characters who are all inspired by Maldivian culture, folklore, tradition. So could you tell us a little bit more about like your process towards creating these characters? Like what made you pick these specific archetypes? Like what is it about them that appealed to you? Like can you give us a little insight into that?
Originally, when we actually came up with the concept of Thakur was it was a little bit of humor involved in all the characters. Like they should all be really funny, like you
Hmm.
know, yelling at one another. Let's just say Tom and Jerry like mixed up with Thakur was like really funny fight scenes, and we had a lot of cinematic planned out for the game, but that never ended up happening. The character designs was for a MOBA game. We still don't have the the generic MOBA game mode at the moment, which is in work right now. But for something like that, we needed character classes, and we just wrote down the most essential classes that we needed, and just brainstormed about what sort of characters would fit in the role. For example, like Bode is a huge, massive character for
Hmm.
which serves as a tank class, so he's huge.
I actually wanted to comment on that as well. One of the things that me and the team found quite cool was the fact that like you have all of these traditional like MOBA character archetypes. You know, you have the ranger archetype and you have the tank and the healer and all of that, but all of them have like a Maldivian spin to it, like a Maldivian interpretation. And I found that little twist to always be the most delightful aspect of these characters. Like for example, as you say, Bode is basically like a big muscular kind of person, but you also have basically a mage character who is a bit of a like a local sorceress type character. How did you get the idea for that one?
We had to like sort of maintain a balance of female and male characters as well for the
Mm-hmm.
first one. Like of course when there are 5 characters you can't balance them, so we thought like we are going to flip a dice and just decide whether we want to put 3 male characters and 2 female characters.
Are there any plans to add new modes, new characters, anything like that in the future for Takuro Wars?
We are currently reworking the current character system, which is a bit messed up for now, but
Mm-hmm.
that works. So after that, I think we are definitely going to add 5 more characters into the game. And
Oh, that is
as
exciting.
for game modes, I think Capture the Flag is finally releasing
Oh yes.
on this new one with definitely more game modes on its way with new maps. Yeah,
All right.
those are in.
Well, that is really good to hear because even in our review, we did mention that Capture the Flag seems to be like one of the key components that seems missing. But hey, if it's coming in the future, we look forward to seeing your take on it. Do you have any plans to mess around with the game balance of the game, or is what we have right now set?
The game is built in a way that we can like change the balance at any time, like real
Mm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
If you change some values right now, the next game you get on will have those updated values. So definitely, game balance is something we are trying to collect as much as data we can before
Mm-hmm.
we update anything. So I think we have enough data right now, and we are definitely going to come up with more balances with this coming new update in
I look
February. Yeah.
forward to it definitely, and we'll try it out. And now that we've talked a bit about Takuro Wars, let's move on to the Islander. Now, the Islander is the project that most people know you for, right? It is your premier project, and it is the one that we've all been kind of waiting, like, to hear bits and pieces about. So let's dive into it. Like, how would you describe this game to an outsider?
Folklore, Maldives, Witcher 3, Assassin's Creed.
Ooh, that's interesting. I like all of those words. Okay, okay. So I guess what we are looking at is a third-person action adventure open world type of scenario.
Exactly. It's not like hyper realistic. You have your needed dose of fantasy characters into the game as well. So
Hmm. Fascinating. Okay, well, I checked out the trailer that you guys put out some time ago, and wow, that was quite eye-catching, I must say. I want to ask a little bit about the scale of the game, right? You mentioned that it's open world. Are we looking at like one very detailed island, or is it just a few reasonably detailed islands? Is there inter-island travel? What's that gonna be like?
sailing in atoll.
Oh wow, that is awesome. I think a comparable experience perhaps would be like the Skellige potion from Witcher 3, something like that.
I think it's
Okay.
definitely going to be bigger than the Witcher 3. I think a single Witcher 3 map. Yeah. That
Exciting.
doesn't mean it's necessarily like all land places that you can go and explore. There's the
Right.
vast open sea as well.
Speaking of the open sea, the Maldives, as most people who do live here know, is pretty much like more than 70% the ocean. I think it might be closer to 80. Don't quote me on that. Is there any options to explore beneath the waves?
Diving is definitely a mechanic, and there's like open world ocean exploration as well.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the story. What can you tell me about the story of The Islander?
For the story at the moment, we're just trying to keep it really like low for now.
Oh, a
But
little mysterious. So currently, what we
yeah,
see is what we get, right?
yeah.
All right, so I want to talk to you about language and culture because this is quite relevant to the topic of the Islander. This is a game that is set in a kind of fantasy version of the Maldives. So, how much of the Maldives is in this game?
From a culture perspective, I think for a language that's spoken in game, like there's voiceover and a lot of cutscenes.
Mm-hmm.
So those are definitely going to be in English,
Hmm.
but you can hear people screaming or shouting in the way in the background, maybe here and there. That's
Uh-huh.
definitely going to be there, and maybe some songs here and there, you
Oh,
know.
that would be awesome. Are you also looking at perhaps a Divehi voice option, so that some people could listen to the Divehi vocals spoken?
I think that's something that's definitely in the roadmap, but right now for the first release, I don't think there's going to be a completely like DV option for Islanders. It's going to be
Well,
English.
I think that either way, it's going to be a pretty awesome experience. And you mentioned Assassin's Creed as like a possible influence, right? So, what kind of
Definitely.
influences did you pull from Assassin's Creed, and what kind of influences did you pull from Witcher 3? I'm not saying that like these are the only ones, but like, what are we looking at in terms of gameplay and presentation?
I think I love how the level details are in Assassin's Creed, like being able to go wherever you want as you please, and
Hmm.
definitely the piracy. I mean, the pirates and stuff on sea, and that's
Yes.
definitely going to be there on Islanders as well.
Hmm.
And the quest system, storytelling, and those things are like a huge inspiration for us, like Witcher 3 and Assassin's Creed. That
Right.
storytelling, yeah.
That is a lot of exciting stuff. So I gotta say, before we move on from this topic to towards the end of our podcast, is there anything else that you would like to mention about the Islander? Anything you would like to add?
I think I would like to add that like a lot of people are asking like when is Islanders going to be out, and
Hmm?
which platforms you're going to release it onto.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of platforms, we are definitely targeting for PS5 and the latest Xbox and PC as well.
Right.
And as for the release date, I think Islanders is still going to take a lot of time. It's still in development, and the only things we share on social media are probably 6 months late,
Mm-hmm.
so that like we have enough content to like correct our mistakes if we put something out wrong. And the release dates are not in months; it's definitely in years still.
All right. Something to think about. Well, in any case, this is a project that a lot of us are really kind of rooting for. So I hope that things go well for you, and we look forward to hearing every positive new update about it. Now, because
Sounds
I'm
good.
talking to one of the few prominent Maldivian game developers, I gotta ask a question for all the aspiring game devs out there, because I know that there are a lot of game lovers in the Maldives who play games and think, you know what, I could do that. So, what would you have as a message or some advice for any aspiring game devs out there, or people who really love games and are thinking of perhaps dipping their toes into the kind of chaotic but also really interesting world of game development?
I think part of like starting into game development, the biggest fear for almost all the people who wants to come into game development is the financial stability. And I think we are proving it wrong for everyone out there who thinks this is not a viable career for them.
Hmm.
We've been doing it for almost 4 years now. This is our fourth year, and we have had a full team since the start. So if we are not financially stable, we are not able to put out those projects. So I would say just start somewhere and look into ways like you could make a simple game and then move from that point into making more complex games.
Well, you heard him, folks. So it's time to bust out those computers and get on Unity Engine or something and start work. But anyway, thank you so much, Shafi, for sharing a little bit of your time with us and some of your insights. It was wonderful talking to you.
It was nice talking to you guys. Thank you for having me again. Yeah.
No worries. And in the future, we would love to hear more about any of the projects that you are involved in, and we wish you the very best. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Anyway, that being said, that brings another episode of Checkpoint Coffee to its close. Thank you for joining me and Shafi this episode where we talked about Arcils, The Islander, and Sakura Wars. You can check out Sakura Wars on iOS and Android. It is out now currently, and you can also check out our review of the game, which Thausin put his heart and soul into. So, thank you very much for listening, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.